Hello, YouTube. We are back with another Lord of the Rings guide, but this time we're going to look at kind of some, I'll call it advanced tips, but they're more advanced settings that can kind of help you play the game more efficiently, or at least make it easier for you in certain circumstances. I thought about doing this just because, again, of all the new players that are in the game that might not even be aware of these options in general. Definitely, old time players will already know about these for the most part. New players might not even know it exists, so I figured I might as well talk about them just in case. You might be wondering, why am I in the Watch a Raid? Well, because the first option we're going to talk about makes it easier to actually even do this specific boss. So when you type post, we're looking for post processing effects. When you I think, depending on your graphical settings, I do believe this is on by default. I could be wrong, but regardless, if you're in the Watcher fight, for example, and sometimes you want to figure out where to actually stand, but you can't see through the water. If you uncheck this, you can now see through the water. You can actually even, there's the Watcher hanging out there. As the tank, tanks generally stand on this platform to tank the Watcher, so you can see a little platform that's under the water here. So as the tank, you can kind of walk on it rather than swim around and stand there. This platform here, of course, falls down, and the party likes standing on it, so you can now actually see it under the water. What this post-processing effect also does is when it's turned off, drunken effects from drinking from the bar, and you get like that weird like warpy, the screen moves side to side and it's super blurry to give you the effect of drunkenness, which is fun. But there's some festival games that revolve around like walking on fence posts while drunk. Well, if you actually turn this off, the all of those big screen effects go away. Having this effect off also makes it easier to deal with the Nazgul fights. Right, the Nazguls that spawn on the legendary servers, the big black purple screen and the shaking camera, and the bright lights and all that kind of stuff. Like it helps change a lot of that, but what can also help change that and make it easier on you, and possibly even help with lag a bit, is dread effects. So when you type in dread under UI settings, there is enabled dread effects. You can turn this off, and all this does is remove the gray screen, the Eye of Sauron flashing, and so obviously you'll still have like your reduced health bar, and you'll do less damage and all that stuff. It doesn't remove dread. It just all the fancy effects that come with dread. This helps with that. And there's also, between the dread effects and the post-processing, there's a lot of fights in the future in terms of for the legendary servers. So for the future of the legendary servers, there's a lot of fights coming up in raids and stuff like that, where turning these off can make it easier to just deal with the fight, because there's just a lot of fancy screen effects to make it more immersive, which is fine. And if you like playing with it, you like playing with it. It's no big deal. It's just if it's harder on your system, or you're struggling to see things, those two things can help with that. Those are the two main ones I wanted to talk about. There's a bunch now. There's a bunch of combat effects and settings. I believe if you make a new account, the majority of these should actually be turned on by default. I think that's the case. I don't know if that's true. I know in previous years, when I've had friends play the game, I've had to go through with them to turn on a lot of these effects because they were always off by default for new accounts. I know when you make a new character, whatever the settings you have for your previous character, um, they'll be on for your new character, except for two, which we'll get into at the end. So I'm pretty sure these are all on in today's age, but just in case, I thought it would be good to at least talk about them so that at the very least you can understand what they do. Um, the first ones I wanted to talk about was show the vitals of your selection's target. When you have this turned on and you target someone or like yourself, I guess if you target yourself, you won't really see it. But if you target another person, you can see that what they're targeting. So in a raid or a dungeon scenario, if this isn't turned on, it's a little bit more difficult to know who's targeting what, who to focus maybe. I mean, in raid scenarios, you should have a raid target focus up, but that's a little bit different. But what this also helps is it works nicely with skill targeting forward. So if you have this turned on, what it allows you to do is it allows you to target an ally and hit the enemy that they're targeting so long as you're within range of that enemy. It's kind of hard to demonstrate solo, but if you're a healer and you're healing the tank, you don't have to switch to the boss or whatever they're targeting to deal damage. You can hit all of your damaging spells as the healer by targeting the tank. So that could make things a little bit easier for you. Some people still like switching, and that's totally fine. But this is just something where I can focus the tank and I can hit all of my buttons and do damage and heal without needing to switch targets. And this works in the reverse, where if you're the healer or you have healing abilities and you're targeting the raid boss or the enemy that's just been pulled by the group, you can then hit your healing abilities and it will heal the person that the enemy you're targeting is focused on. So if the raid boss is targeting the tank, and either you're a healer or maybe you're an off healer like a captain or something, you've got a couple of healing abilities that you would use to target or to heal the tank, you can just have the raid boss targeted, hit your healing buttons, and it will automatically heal the tank without you needing to focus them. So those two work really nicely together, and I think they're really important to have. Again, they should be on by default, but just in case, they might not be, or you didn't know what they did. That's what they do. So you have show the vitals of your selection's target, so you can see whoever you're targeting, you can see their target, and then skill targeting forward. Whatever your target is focusing on, you can use your skills through your target. And then this other important one that I feel like is turned off by default, but I could be wrong, is this enable persistent area effect visualization. I wonder if there's a good enemy to do it on. Maybe the lizards? I'll start targeting the lizards. What this is supposed to do is make it so that... No, they don't. Okay. Any enemy or ally that leaves an AoE, like don't stand here or stand here for buffs skill on the ground, it leaves a red border around it to show you where the actual ability ends on the ground. So captains, when they place their banners on the ground, there'll be a border on the edges of the actual area of effect, so that you know if you stand on the inside of this border, you get the banner buff. But if you stand on the outside of it, you no longer get the banner buff. There, let's say on Halls of Crafting second boss, the fire that shoots out of the vents on the ground, um, there's an actual border around the fire to show you if you stand on the inside of it where the fire is, you're gonna get burned. But if you stand on the outside of it, you're going to be fine. So it gives you an actual hard border to be like, oh, don't stand here, or stand here depending on the situation, because if it's a Captain Banner, for example, right? This works in PvP though for like war leader banners, for spider webs. There's tons of different or sappers that throw bombs on the ground. You'll see a little red border around where the bomb is. Again, that should be on by default, but if it's not on, I would suggest turning this on, this persistent area effect visualization. It is a game changer, and I would argue it's basically a must-have in a raid and dungeon scenario, because if you're someone that's dying to things and you don't know why, you're like, I didn't think I was standing in it, the fire wasn't touching me, why am I dying? What could be happening is that the fire effect doesn't look like it's hitting you, but the actual damaging area of the fire is larger than the actual flame animation. So that's why this area effect visualization gives you a better representation of the entire area that you're going to take damage in, or the entire area that's going to buff you. So that, I just think that's a really important one to put on. Now, the last two that I wanted to discuss are the play optional combat animations and allow combat animations blending. These two are a little bit of a semi-newer thing, and I say newer as in they weren't in the base game years and years ago. They were added later. There may have been other... I think also the area effect visualization is new in that way, but they've been in the game for years. But when these two were first added, even though it says it's a cosmetic option only, they did actually have an impact on your combat effectiveness, as in it did actually help you increase your damage. Now, so old-time players will know this. Newer players, this won't matter, and for me, I think it's more of a placebo effect, where I think it's working, so it obviously, or I think it does something, so it obviously does what I'm thinking, right? So as a little example here, I used 2 skills there, and there's my third skill. It may have looked like 1, but it was 2. Because what I did is I canceled the animation of sweeping cut to use a third skill, or a second skill, to like cancel the animation so that the damage was done faster, so that I could weave into the next skill. This also works for auto attacks, where your auto attacks, whether you're a hunter or really helpful for melee, is as you're just using a normal ability, an auto attack will be weaved in, but you won't see the auto attack, but the damage will still happen. Now, with these turned off, that can still, the blending of the animations still happens, and your auto attacks will still go off. So it doesn't technically change anything. Visually, there is a difference, so that you'll actually see your skills blend together rather than you doing the animation separately, but the damage still happens just as fast. But in the past, this was not the case. In the past, auto attacks wouldn't be weaved into your skills if these were turned off. So it did technically have an impact on your combat. When you needed to interrupt something, so for example, on Guardian, I have Stamp. I would need these turned on in order for Stamp to be active instantly. So that no matter what I was doing, if I hit Stamp to interrupt something, it would happen instantly. But if these were turned off, the animation would have to finish before Stamp would trigger. This is no longer the case. So you don't need these turned on. It is kind of more of a it is truly a visual thing, like it states for the optional combat animations, right? It says near the end, this is no impact on combat effectiveness or gameplay, is only cosmetic. Same thing with combat animation bleeding. It has no impact on combat, it is only cosmetic. I believe those are true now. However, as someone who's played this game for years and who's always had them on, I feel like it's definitely more of a placebo effect thing of, well, it worked in the past, and I feel like I do more damage by it being turned on because it looks like I'm doing more damage because the animations are being cut short so that the next skill can trigger faster. So obviously that means I'm doing no damage. But based on the testing I've done, it doesn't actually change your damage. However, I still wanted to point it out just for those new players because these are definitely turned off by default. I always turn them on when I make a new character. So I know for a fact that newer players probably won't even know that these exist because the game doesn't even teach you about these things. They're just there chilling in combat options turned off. So I wanted to point them out. I do believe that was all of the options that I wanted to talk about. I guess a couple of others I could show quickly is under social options. There's the fellowship, 2 fellowship ones, and the 2 selection ones. So when for fellowship, only show dispellable effects, and then fellowship only show effects cast by you. With this, what this does is when you're in a fellowship or a raid, all of these little like buff icons will go away on your allies. If you and the only ones that will appear are, okay, so if I need to, like, if I'm a healer or let's say a lore master or even a captain, like a support role, and I need to remove, a fear dot or a wound dot that's on an ally, but I can't see it on the ally because there's too many buffs on them, and I can't see which ones are bad and which ones are good, kind of thing. If you put on show only dispellable effects, then all of those like extra buffs, like captain buffs, the like tome buffs, like extra health, hope tokens, the welcome back stuff, subscriber buffs, like all that stuff will go away so that you can only see the ones that are actually doing harm to your allies, and you can see, oh, they have a wound on them because it's the only thing that's on them, let's remove it. Now the other thing that you can do is, if you want to know if you do have that support role and you can buff your allies, and you want to make sure that your hope token that you use is hitting everyone, then you can also have show only effects cast by you. Then with both of these turned on, you'll see everything that you're buffing your ally with, including like hope tokens, and you'll also see the like the wound dots, fear dots, etc. that are on your allies, so you know how to remove them or when to remove them when you need to. The selection ones are a little bit tricky. I have them off right now, mostly because I was doing a bunch of missions and delvings and stuff, so I needed to see what buffs that enemies were having. What this does do, though, especially in like a Nazgul fight, is if you have these boxes checked, it will make raid fights a lot smoother. There'll be a little bit less lag. It makes PvP a lot easier as well, and it in terms of a lag scenario when you target something, and it also makes the Nazgul fights on the legendary servers also much easier. Because what it allows is only show dispellable effects. So when an enemy has a corruption, you know that it's there and you can remove it. Show only effects cast by you, then you know, okay, I'm only seeing the things that I'm doing and the things that need to be removed off the boss. So I'm seeing corruptions and I'm seeing my dots, I'm seeing my debuffs, so it's easier to maintain my debuffs, it's easier to maintain my buffs my dots. And it's easier to remove corruptions because that's all I'm seeing. I won't see the million of Runekeeper dots that are on the enemy. I won't see the all the Lore Master debuffs that are on the enemy. I don't want to see all of that. I just want to see what I'm doing. However, what this does do is when you have either one of these turned on, you won't see certain buffs that enemies get when they're next to something or there's something else triggering a buff. So sometimes there's a scenario where an enemy gains a reflectability. Like Dark Delving on the legendary servers is a good example. There's a certain raid boss in the Moria dungeon, or raid, the Dar Narglebug raid, that's a good example. You won't see those effects if these are turned on, meaning you won't know when the reflect happens. You have to go based off of what you see on the animation of the boss, because all the bosses will do an animation before the reflect goes up, but you won't know when it actually ends, because sometimes these buffs last for 10 seconds, sometimes it's 30 seconds. So if you have these on, you won't be able to see the reflect in these scenarios. So this is something to keep in mind. Because even if you only have show dispellable effects, then you're not going to see what you're doing, and you're also not going to see what the boss is doing, and vice versa. If you only show effects cast by you, you then won't see dispellable effects, and you won't see the reflex. So that's why I have both of them turned off right now. I think that's a little bit better, but there are some scenarios where turning it off is just easier when you're not worried about needing to know what the boss is doing. Yeah, I think that is all. I think that's definitely all that I wanted to go through. Because we went through seeing things easier. We went through the dread effects. None of the other settings are super important in terms of at least like being efficient in raid and whatnot. Yeah, so I think we will call it there. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. If there's any other guide like this that you want to see, please let me know in the comments. As of right now, I don't have any other guides planned aside from class guide stuff that I'm slowly working on. So if there's any of these other like miscellaneous guides or leveling guides or anything else like that, please let me know. Otherwise, yeah, I will see you next time.